During your climbing adventures, or heck, sometimes even in normal games, I'd imagine you've been in a situation where your team was in a prime position to win. The enemy team is down to inhibitors, you just secured Baron, and you're all set for one final push to close out the game. Only to find out the enemy Tryndamere somehow beat you to it despite his team being super far behind. A seemingly easy game up in smoke just like that. And it all happened so fast, in just 60 seconds he went from your bottom tier 2 turret all the way to your Nexus. You, my friend, have just experienced a win condition known as split pushing, and that's what this video's topic is going to be about. Split pushing has always been an inconspicuous phenomenon in League of Legends, something that everyone knows about but doesn't have a firm understanding of. So today I want to spend some time discussing it in greater detail with the recent release of Hullbreaker as a dedicated split push item and Anathema's Chains as a dedicated anti-split push item. Yet, in spite of those two additions to the shop, there's been a steady decline in its validity over the years. Split pushing is a core fundamental macro mechanic in the game, just as important as, if not more than securing objectives like Baron and Dragon, because they often take place at the exact same time in response to one another. In fact, it happens more frequently than you might think. Many players consider split pushing as a dedicated win condition, something that you and ideally the entire team has to commit to. Not true at all. It can be a smaller aspect of a greater macro strategy. Just about every high-level top and mid laner have a modicum of experience with this because chances are they do it every single game. The official definition for split pushing, according to the wiki's terminology page, is to continuously advance in one lane while teammates, and by extension the enemy team, are focused elsewhere. A more detailed explanation of split pushing would be when you move to an undefended or exposed lane, such as a lane with less towers, to apply pressure by pushing the wave in attempts to threaten a critical objective on the map. Consequently, this can only happen after the laning phase dissolves, since all three lanes will be guarded simultaneously for the first 10 to 15 minutes of the game, and due to a myriad of other factors. For one, champions in the early to mid game don't have the necessary resources, wherewithal, and speed to pull off a meaningful split push. A level 16 Tryndamere can one-shot an entire wave with a single usage of Spinning Slash, and his ability to damage towers is far more potent than if he was level 5. Also, split pushing usually requires step timers to be long enough to be efficiently executed on. After all, getting a solo kill level 3 won't give you too much leeway to push your advantage, since your opponent will likely teleport right on back in a matter of seconds. To what scale it's executed on can be ambiguous though. You don't have to play a dedicated champion or spend an entire game split pushing a side lane for it to be considered split pushing. Even so much as clearing some waves or spending a minute or two going 1-3-1 to make the most out of Baron counts as split push. But as I said before, a lot of players believe that is the case, and so for the sake of not confusing the two, I will exclusively talk about dedicated hard split pushing. Frustratingly enough, just like how the definition of split pushing varies depending on situation, so do the champions. There's no strict line in the sand for who can or who can't. If we go by technicalities, all 156 champions, even supports like Yuumi, can perform a split push if she really sets her mind to it. Champions who are good at split pushing need to be proficient in at least 3 of 4 criteria. 1. They have to deal considerable damage through auto attacks, seeing as that's the only way to hurt towers. Any champion with either high attack speed or a basic attack empowerment checks this box off pretty well. You can also include any champion who has a penchant for building Spellblade, especially Lichbane users. You've likely seen Echo chunk more than half with a single phase dive auto attack paired with Lichbane. 2. They need a kit suited for single combat. If you're performing a split push, the enemy team will likely send at least one person to stop you, or attempt to. This means you'll need to be capable of exerting more pressure than any one person on the enemy team is able to match in order to force them to send another person, which then worsens their chances of contesting objectives on the other side of the map. 3. Wave clear. Obviously, in order to split push, you have to push waves very fast. Out of the 4 conditions, this one is the least pronounced because chances are, if you deal very high damage to towers, you also deal high damage to minions, so it's sort of a package deal. Not a single split pusher comes to mind who has ironically bad wave clear. 4. They have to be fast. Even if you're confident in your ability to 1v2 should the enemy team decide to send that many after you, performing an effective split push isn't exactly based on how fast you take towers. As long as you waste as much time as possible and draw as much attention and pressure, that alone is a job well done. Ideally, that champion should be hard to catch or pin down. Whatever form this takes, it doesn't matter. Dashes or self-peel work just fine. To add on to that, if the champion in question is capable of closing long distances in a short period of time, that can count as well. Quinn, Twisted Fate, and Shen aren't the best when it comes to split pushing, but they can respond and rotate to team fights faster than anyone. That entails the privilege of not having to commit as hard to pressuring side lanes as their peers. Going by this criteria, we can infer there are a lot of eligible split pushes. A few noteworthy examples would be the ones you saw on the thumbnail. Trundle's wave clear isn't the best, at least not without Ravenous or Titanic Hydra, but his tower pressure is insane thanks to his Q and W. He's surprisingly hard to catch with his high movement speed and Pillar of Ice, as well as being one of the most difficult champions to take on 1v1. Tryndamere checks off all 4 boxes. One of the best duelists in the game, super fast with his low cooldown E, which actually wave clears pretty dang well, and he can 3-shot towers with his high attack speed and damage. Yorick is the slowest of the 3, but his tower pressure ranks among the best in the game. That, and he kinda sucks everywhere else, so split pushing is really his only saving grace. Aside from them, some noteworthy honorable mentions are Echo, Nasus, Udyr, Twisted Fate, Shen, Jax, Fiora, and Camille. I'll repeat this once more. Technically, anyone can be a split pusher if they really want to, but these champions are arguably the best ones. Accomplishing a safe and effective split push may be one of the most difficult things to do in a typical League of Legends game. There's a myriad of situations you face that can make split pushing ideal or not ideal, and this is why it's never been adopted as a conventional win condition because it's not reliable enough to accrue consistent results. The most prominent issue is the need for the team to unanimously agree on pursuing a split push. It goes without saying, if you want to push a side lane, your team is going to be down a member, which is a huge sacrifice to make. There aren't that many team comps that can win a 4v5 in convincing fashion. So most of the time, the remaining 4 teammates have to play around your split push and buy you as much time as possible. Now, some people might bring up the argument that you just have to take teleport and you can still assist your team when need be, but that can be a pitfall in some ways. For instance, let's say you're pushing bot lane while the enemy team is trying to get Baron. Unless they're complete idiots, all vision surrounding the pit will have been cleared, so any spot you can teleport to will likely be far away from the action. Furthermore, teleport has a 4-second channel time, during which a good half of your team, if not all of them, can be wiped out before you even arrive. Split pushing is inherently a very risky strategy because of League's location-centric gameplay. It requires delicate caution and patience to pull off, which is near impossible to expect from people in solo queue and pro play. In solo queue, you have neither open verbal communication nor synergy with your teammates, the 2 things you need above all else. Also, 9 times out of 10, your team will fight a 4v5 and then spam ping question marks all over you for not being there no matter how many times you ask them to stall for time. As for pro play, even though you have both communication and synergy, so does the enemy team. Like I said before, split pushing forces your team to play around a 4v5 on the other side of the map, and there's almost never a situation where that isn't a disadvantage that the enemy team can exploit for maximum gain. Now, normally that wouldn't be enough to question the viability of split pushing. Even if your team inevitably loses Baron, you might have been able to secure 4 towers and an inhibitor, exposing the enemy nexus so you can threaten a backdoor. There's also the frequent possibility of the enemy team having no idea how to counter your split push, thus allowing you to single-handedly gain control of the entire neutral game. If that's the case, what else prevents split pushing from ever becoming more than just a fringe strategy? The answer is due in part to the macro within League of Legends being predicated on snowballing in almost every aspect of the game from the start of it to the end of it. The consequences of each action go far beyond its immediate result. When you die in lane, your opponent doesn't just get 300 gold and kill experience, you also lose minions, perhaps tower plates, your opponent gains lane priority, and possibly may rotate to take Dragon, Rift Herald, or assist a jungler in stealing your team's camps. If you get aced in a team fight, you don't just lose 2250 gold. You may also lose several towers, maybe an inhibitor, perhaps Baron. There's always an extra expense added onto the bill, and that extra expense is at times more important than the kills themselves. The value of objectives has far exceeded what is possible to obtain via split pushing in most circumstances. When you split push, the most you can obtain are towers, CS, enemy camps, and inhibitors. Aside from inhibitors, none of them come close to the amount of gold value lost from your teammates getting aced and losing Baron. Additionally, even if you were to grab 2 towers and an inhibitor for your team, the enemy team may have done the same thing after winning the 5v4. The only way for split pushing to produce a net positive outcome is if nothing were to happen. That is, if your 4 teammates did a good enough job wasting their time long enough for you to accomplish your objective. But because they're operating at a numbers disadvantage, the number of ways they can do that is extremely limited. Second, loss of overall applicable vision makes split pushing too dangerous since it's harder to trace enemy movements around the map. Those of you who are here before Season 6 may remember stealth wards being purchasable from the shop, allowing other players besides support to secure vision for their team. Then, in Season 6 and 7, there was a tracker's knife, which gave junglers a way to supply extra wards too. With both of those removed now, the only wards non-supports can place are trinkets and control wards, and they're only allowed 1 of them per person. The ability to get vision on the map has been drastically lowered compared to previous years, and without that vision, most people won't feel safe going that far in unless they're playing someone with immaculate vision coverage like Quinn. Third, most of the time it's simply better to group up with your team, win the 5v5, and push to end the game as a unit. Earlier, I talked about how while you're split pushing, your team will get 5v4'd and aced, and the enemy team will be able to make a hard push to take an inhib, which matches the inhib you just took while also getting more kills. That's the issue. There is hardly ever a time where split pushing is more rewarding than a straight 5v5 confrontation. The only time it does is if a split push leads directly to destroying the enemy nexus. Although the counter-argument to this would be if you're in a favorable position to win but the enemy team has a far better team fight than you do, in which case things like 1-4 or 1-3-1 is the correct way to go about it. You get the idea though. 9 times out of 10 it's just better to group and end the game the normal way. Lastly, towers are nowhere near as defensive of a bastion as they used to be. Tower dives are super common these days, and even against champions with incredible wave clears such as Anivia and Sivir, the Baron Empowered Cannon minion, if nothing else, will slowly be able to whittle down the turret, and you're likely throwing whatever long-ranged abilities you can at them. Essentially, it's no longer possible to defend a siege indefinitely, which was typically the best way a team could buy the Splitpusher time to pressure another lane. There just isn't a worthwhile incentive for people to play the split push game that conventional means can do for equal or better results. Is it still viable though? Absolutely, it's just never going to be a meta strategy, and I'm thinking it has a large part to do with the lack of external support for it. By external support, I'm talking about things like runes, items, summoner spells, objectives, and whatnot. At several points, we did actually have some pretty decent supplementation for split pushing. ZZ Rod Portal and Banner of Command were both items you could build to enhance side lane pressure, with the former consistently generating tiny void minions that would do pretty serious damage to towers, and the latter augmenting an existing minion to effectively become a super minion on demand. Both have since been deleted from the game for their own reasons. There was also the original Rift Herald buff, Glimpse of the Void, which lasted 20 minutes. It was a pretty significant buff. If you got it right before Rift Herald died at 19 minutes, you would have it for practically the entire rest of the game. When no allied champions were nearby, you would gain 5% damage reduction from enemy champions, while also gaining an energized effect that would cause your next basic attack to occasionally deal bonus magic damage even to turrets. You might be asking, wasn't the whole point of current Rift Herald to aid in split pushing? Kinda. Thing is, because Shelly is really fragile on her own, she's usually better to use when grouped up since you can zone the enemy team off of her to let her stay alive longer, again, weighing the benefits of split pushing versus grouping up. There's also the Demolish rune, but that was mostly there to give tanks meaningful turret damage since they build neither attack damage nor ability power. That leaves us with just Hullbreaker. I think this was supposed to be a mixture of Banner of Command and Glimpse of the Void. For the most part, the champions that want to build it get pretty good mileage out of it, but those are reserved only for AD split pushers, particularly bruisers like Trundle and Yorick, not so much on-hit attackers like Jax and Tryndamere. Honestly though, I feel like it was meant to be intentional. Split pushing requires a very specific set of abilities or a specific playstyle, so by making it a meta strategy, it alienates all of the champions who aren't equipped to either perform it or go against it. At the same time, it was one of the few alternative win conditions popular enough for widespread consideration, and given my stance on how it feels like there's only one way to win games nowadays, it wouldn't hurt to have some semblance of diversity and macro play, rather than every game playing out a similar way. What do you guys think? I know for the vast majority of us, split pushing is seen as more irritating than innovative since we're usually on the receiving end of it rather than the other way around, but play devil's advocate against yourself for a bit. Do you think split pushing would make the game more interesting or more degenerate? Let me know in the comments down below. But for now, if you enjoyed the video, it would be awesome if you could leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this, don't forget to follow me on my socials and join my Discord server if you haven't yet. Also, check out my other discussion videos after this one. I have a ton of topics that you can watch. Until then, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for the next one. Take care.